Welcome to the Narcissist Slayers podcast with your hosts, Hope Jay
and Lynn Catalano.
Every episode, we focus on recovery from narcissistic abuse. We talk about topics that we believe will help people to identify signs of abuse, learn strategies to cope, and most importantly, how to heal and move forward from narcissistic abuse. We are both survivors of narcissistic abuse ourselves, lawyers, and one of us is an author.
Well, thank you, Hope. My book, Wrecking Ball Relationships, How to Identify, Live With, or Leave the Narcissist in Your Life, is available in many places, including my website, lynncatalano.com.
Because we have been in your shoes, we know how difficult this journey can be. That is why I founded the Center for Hope of Western New York, a nonprofit organization which provides education, support, and advocacy for survivors of narcissistic abuse. You can find out more about the Center for Hope at centerforhopewny.org, and all donations are gratefully welcomed and tax exempt.
Please follow us on X and Instagram at NarcSlayersPod, and also on Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, Spotify, and YouTube, the Narcissist Slayers Podcast. You can also email us directly with your questions at narcslayers@centerforhopewny.org.
Welcome back to the Narcissist Slayers. I'm your co-host, Hope Jay.
And I'm your co-host, Lynn Catalano.
And today, we have a very interesting topic.
Yes.
How to recognize the wolf in sheep's clothing, otherwise known as the covert narcissist.
I think when you say it that way, it makes it sound like this person might be fun and humorous, and they're not. So let's just stipulate that.
Well,
okay?
I think, I like to use that analogy because I think that the covert narcissist is actually one of the most dangerous narcissists of all.
Oh.
But yet they, they come across as mild-mannered.
Well,
they're not the bombastic, in-your-face, overt narcissist that most of us kind of think of when we think of, the sort of typical traits of a narcissist.
Like, I think of the person who has to grab the microphone and needs the spotlight on them and needs to lead the group and needs to be the main speaker and doesn't like to be interrupted. Like, I think of that as the overt narcissist, and this person is not that person at all.
And this person is, like I said, the wolf in sheep's clothing because you don't suspect them.
Yes.
And it's harder.
It is much more difficult.
It's so much harder to figure out what the hell is going on because they have this sort of mild-mannered, sort of woe is me personality where, they tend to kind of fly under the radar. Yeah. They're the type that maybe might be the wallflower in the room that's kind of watching everybody else, but they're not the one that's standing up with the center of attention, which is, again, the type of narcissist I think most of us are familiar with, the one who commands all the attention in the room.
Yes.
This is the covert narc, and what does what covert means, right?
Right, like sort of secret, right? In a way. But I have a couple things to share.
Yes.
So I want to share with you this quote from Dr. Ramani because we talk about her frequently.
We do.
And
we love Dr. Ramani, and we'd love to have Dr. Ramani as a guest on our podcast.
I'd like to have Dr. Ramani.
Yeah.
So she says that covert narcissists feel like the victimized, vulnerable, less skilled narcissist, which I think is such a funny way to put it. She says they have a lot of contempt.
Yes.
Contempt for why they're being held to the same standards as everyone else.
Yes.
So here are the two characteristics that I think make covert narcissists stand out a little bit for you. Number one, they are chronic malcontents, which I think Hope just described when she said they often are like, woe is me.
Yes.
Okay, so that's a constant.
Yeah.
And then the other big one is their passive aggressive behavior.
Oh God, yes.
and like I know sometimes passive aggressive behavior doesn't stand out to you, but you don't realize like, why am I so irritated at that person? Like, what did they do?
Well, maybe we should just take a moment to describe what passive aggressive behavior is versus aggressive behavior, right?
So I think I have a definition from the Mayo Clinic.
You do? Okay.
According to the Mayo Clinic, passive aggressive behavior is defined as a pattern of indirectly expressing negative feelings instead of openly addressing them.
Right.
There's a disconnect between what a passive-aggressive person says
yes.
and what he or she does.
Correct. So I have, experienced being on the other side of passive-aggressive people for a long period of my life. And not every person, by the way, who resorts to passive-aggressive conflict resolution means that, it's not actually resolution, conflict avoidance
yes.
Is a narcissist. We're not saying that.
Right.
But it tends to, the covert narcs tend to fall squarely in that realm.
Yeah.
Because they're not looking to resolve conflict, and they want to make you feel bad about yourself. Oh. And that's truly, I think, the thing that passive aggressive behavior causes another person to feel is badly about yourself. Yeah. They couch it in, I'm just teasing and you're too sensitive.
Can't you take a joke?
Can't you take a joke?
The number one gaslighting phrase,
yes.
by the way. Yes.
And so oftentimes I think, and I know I was guilty of this, I wondered if I was too sensitive and if I couldn't take a joke, and maybe there was something wrong with my sense of humor. I mean, because I found the things that were said to me as so hurtful. It was painful sometimes and I much prefer, like, I'm not a passive aggressive person, if anybody could tell. No. I'm the other side of things. If I have a problem with you, you're gonna know, and I'm gonna tell you directly, and probably sometimes with maybe not as much panache or maybe, I don't know, compassion as I should, because
it's compassion. It's just, you just want to say you're just authentic.
Yes.
That's it.
I am, and sometimes I think it's difficult for other people, my level of authenticity or whatever. But I always say I would much rather have somebody tell me what the problem is, rather than like Dr. Ram or whatever the Mayo Clinic. Yeah. They skirt around what's really wrong, and what they're truly upset or offended about. And they just, throw daggers in your direction, and you don't really know, what the problem is or why. And when you are in the receiving end of a lot of passive aggressive remarks and behaviors, it very quickly takes a huge toll on the receiving person's self-esteem and feelings of self-worth.
Yeah. I mean, these are people who are very judgmental. They possess this very smug superiority.
Yes.
So
smug superiority, exactly. But it's in this very quiet, judgy way. It's not in the way that you would. Overt narcs are obviously very judgmental as well, but they're going to tell you. Yes. They're going to tell you that exactly what their opinion of you is. Yes. A covert narc is going to do it this more. They're going to criticize you all the time. It's a constant sort of barrage of low-level criticisms. Yeah. They're not going to come right out with the rage storms, right? But they're going to do it in this really more subtle. It's so subtle and insidious way that covert narcs relate to people.
Overt narcissists do this thing where they need to get credit for everything. Like I actually said to my mother years and years and years before I recognized that my father suffered from NPD, that he should get a gold star tattooed on himself, because he was always searching for that validation. Like he would say, didn't I do a good job? Didn't I? Like he always needed that gold star. Yeah. So he needed, though, very public validation. Yes. Like he needed newspaper and awards and all kinds of things, okay? That kind of level of recognition. Yes. Covert narcissists do things and they still seek the recognition, but they just don't do it the same way. So they might be the people who are, knitting blankets for a church drive because they need to be recognized on Sunday. Yes. And
or they're making soup for the sick neighbor, and they're sending cookie bouquets to everybody, so that people think that they're This actually, I'm using real life examples of my covert narc.
Oh my God.
But sending cookie bouquets, you know, to all the people, so that people are like, oh my God, he's such a nice person.
They're such a nice person. Like that's what they are driving
Yes.
towards. They want
the
that.
impression management is huge.
Yes, but it's just different
Right.
than covert and overt. Very different. You know, it's funny. I had a client once whose mother-in-law was a covert narcissist, and they love to use triangulation. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if when we did our terms, if that was on our list of terms.
So we might have covered it briefly, but
But I just want to go over real quick. So triangulation is definitely where you pit two people against one another. And so for a mother-in-law, she's probably pitting her son against her daughter-in-law.
Right.
But in other situations, narcissistic parents love to pit siblings against one another.
And narcissistic, you know, men who are juggling multiple women, they like to pit the women against each other.
So, and what happens, like what's the outcome of this triangulation? No, the covert narcissist hopes, like their goal, their end game, is to be the savior, the moderator, the problem solver, and to come in and tell you both,
right.
I've got the solution, like I'm the one, and put it all together. Aren't I the best? Don't you need me? You know, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So anyway, my client had 4 children, and the mother-in-law selected one of the children. These were all her grandchildren.
Yeah.
She selected one, and that was the one she communicated with. And she told the one grandchild she could come over to her house anytime, but not the other 3.
Yeah.
I mean, unbelievable.
Well, that's typical in narcissistic families too. They show like a ton of favoritism to the golden child, and then you have the black sheep,
the scapegoat.
Yeah, the scapegoat.
Yes.
We could spend a whole podcast on that.
Yes.
And maybe we should. But back to like covert narc tactics. So you know, the covert narc is he's unassuming. He's not the one that everyone is going to kind of, and that's why I think it's so hard when you're dealing with a covert narc on the other side, is because they've done so much with the impression. Overt narcs sometimes are just unlikable people.
Yes.
And other people dislike them as well because they're unbearable and obnoxious in the workplace and everything else. Covert narcs tend to be the more likable ones.
I agree.
To the people in the outer sphere.
I agree.
They don't know what's going on within the household because they're just as awful to their partners and their children as any other narcissist. But like you said, you know, they're the ones who are out there knitting the sweaters or running the church drive or, you know, sending, making soup for the sick neighbors or sending, you know, bouquets to people. And so they seem, and they don't have that same nature.
Yeah.
They're much more even introverted, I would dare to say. They're introverted people who are, you know, they're pulling the puppet strings from the back of the stage, right? Mm-hmm. They're not in front. They're behind you, manipulating all the people from behind, so you don't even realize that that it's them. Yeah. It's really fascinating and quite complicated when you're dealing with a covert narc, because they're not like standing up and they don't tend to be the you know, the real, like I said, the bombastic physical abusers either.
Right.
They're very, very good, very skilled at the emotional abuse and manipulation. They're very, very skilled at it.
So I'm going to give you just 5 typical dramas that they like to create. Okay.
Yeah.
Number 1, they love to be the victim.
Oh God, yes.
Maybe,
they're always the victim.
Maybe more so than an overt narcissist. They need to portray the victim to whomever the audience is.
Oh, for sure.
Number 2, as long as you make them look good, they won't object. And again, that goes back to image management. No, impression management.
Impression management.
Yes, I love that. And so they need everyone to think highly of them. And if you disparage that, they're going to have a problem with you.
Oh, they're by the way, not to cut you off because we can finish in a minute, but I think it's really important. The covert narcs are the kings and queens of the silent treatment.
Oh.
That is their ace in the hole. It is because it's not perceived as an aggressive abuse tactic. It's the withdrawal of I'm refusing to engage, I'm refusing to talk to you. You're the problem. You're the one that and this happened so many times in my previous relationship. Like, I was the problem because I wanted to resolve the conflict, and I was doing it wrong. So if he didn't like my tone, he didn't like what I was saying, he didn't like, anything of, then of course he had, gave himself the out because he was the victim of my aggression toward him, and then would withdraw completely because he was the victim. And so he then could continue that withdrawal for days and weeks sometimes. Weeks. But because it doesn't appear on the outside of being overt aggression, these covert narcs are the masters of the silent treatment.
Number 3 is they don't respect boundaries in your life at all. And so if you're trying to set healthy boundaries, which, Hope and I are going to tell you that is key to your mental, emotional, and physical health, they're going to see it as pushing back. So they are not going to respect that.
Yeah, narcissists in general don't accept boundaries, so absolutely.
They are always going to create confusion and this way of passive self-importance, because again, they're trying to elevate themselves in this covert way, if you will. And then number 5, your life takes a backseat to the covert narcissist needs every time. And so I feel like, I hope we're giving you the keys to recognize this person. I had a client once who said to me, oh, no, he's not, her partner was not a narcissist, because she only saw a narcissist in the way that my father was a very overt narcissist.
It's the more typical depiction.
Yes.
That's why they're harder to spot.
Yes.
And it's also harder to convince not only yourself but other people of what's going on, because they're not. It's all this covert stuff.
Yes, but they do wear a mask, just like an overt narcissist, so that they are going to behave very differently in public than they do in private. And you really need to be able to recognize this person. So I guess, we kind of come to a place at every episode of our podcast where we want to at least give you some ideas of, if you relate to these concepts, if you feel like you have this person in your life, if you are in a toxic relationship, what should you do? Like, how can you cope with this at all? And I guess I'd go back to my first answer every time, which is find your support system. And that means your friends, your family, whomever it is that you were able to talk to that you now feel isolated from because of your toxic relationship. Please know they love you. They still want you in their lives. Even if you haven't spoken to them in 6 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever you've been in this toxic relationship, go call them now.
One of the things when, you're dealing again with a covert narc, I think it takes longer. And you tend to give that person infinitely more chances because, like I said earlier, very rarely is there going to be physical abuse in a relationship like this. So I think it takes women and men longer to get to the point where they're able to recognize, what's happening in their relationship. So, I think something that if I'm listening to this podcast and I'm thinking, geez, I wonder, that sounds a lot like, the person I'm currently with. If I were you, I would go to the Center for Hope, WNY.org website, And we have a quiz on our website that I think really helps to orient people.
I agree.
To understand whether they are actually in an abusive relationship.
Yeah.
And to me, it tends to be like a really good starting point for a lot of people who are struggling with, am I in an abuser? Is this guy an abuser or woman an abuser?
Yeah.
So, start there. And if you see yourself in, the answers to that quiz are coming back and it's like, oh my God, yes, that's me. Yes, that's my relationship. Yes, I felt that way. I think that will give you some self-awareness and strength to do, what we suggest, which is to reach out to your support system, reach out to a therapist, fill out an application on our website for our support group.
Right.
Find other resources and begin to start your journey to get out of this relationship.
Yes,
it's often a long road.
Yes.
It's often a long road. And that's why we do this podcast. That's why Lynn and I are so committed to this cause.
Yes.
We've both been through a relationship like this. We know how difficult it is to get out.
Yes.
And and we want you to find those resources and to avail yourself of the help that is out there.
Please.
So one of the things that we are asking, if you do like our content, is to follow us on our social media platforms. If you can, just take a moment and find us on Facebook. We are the Narcissist Slayers Podcast. On LinkedIn as well. And if you follow us on Instagram or X at NarcSlayersPod. You can also send questions to our email at narcslayers@centerforhopewny.org. And we are going to be starting a Patreon sometime soon where we're going to be answering questions that you write in. So please write into us with your questions and we will see you next time.
If you're watching this on YouTube right now, subscribe.
Subscribe. Yeah.
Please.
Yeah.
Please.
Please subscribe.
Yes. And guess what? If you follow us on any of these platforms, you're going to get notified of a new episode first. So please follow us.
Thank you so much and we'll see you next time on the Narcissist Slayers.